puzzling, isn't it? Can you make any sense of it? Here's Damascus House folding up. Here it is, right on the peak of London. If you remember this area, 30 years ago, it was quite interesting, quite notable. The number of spiritual centres, hospitals, places of healing, etc., etc., on these peripheries of London, Hampstead, Highgate, monasteries. In Hampstead, the road I occupy is just off Hermitage Lane, where there was once a hermitage. The old order changeth, yielding place to new. What on earth is happening? Now, in the past, of course, we've studied some of the old texts, and we've noted symbolic indications therein. The several levels of teaching one can find in these old masterpieces. But we did agree, I think we agreed anyway, that the interpretation of the old-time texts, if it yielded any insight, had only relevance if it enabled people alive today to interpret the signs of the times. What is happening in the here and now, individually and collectively. To perceive the individual meaning is to gain insight also into the collective phenomenon. So it seems to me. Which brings us back to the old adage, know thyself. Know what is happening in this. To find what we are is to find also where we are. And to perceive, if you like, the meaning of life for the planet as a whole. So, I would much prefer to be in sattvic mode. We all know what that means, don't we? Sattvic mode. But I'm adjusted at the moment to warrior mode, that is, Rajasic mode. Essentially it means not wisdom, but action as the first factor. They're indivisible, or should be. But in sattva, wisdom is, and action follows on somewhat at some stage. In Rajas, rightly related, there is action, and if we are well adjusted, action and wisdom are one. I much prefer to be up on the mountain, watching the action from down below, and empathizing with what is happening. It's a wretched nuisance having to be engaged all the time, isn't it? Do we all find that? So what does it mean? I don't know. It's a good thing not to know. Many people find it discouraging if you say you don't know. What's the advantage of not knowing? What is not knowing? What is knowing? What is knowing? The Greeks, of course, were adroit at synthesizing and summing things up. And their particular mode of summary took this form. There are two sorts of knowledge. There's the knowledge of information that we all need, indispensable in a given context, which we receive, usually verbally, maybe in written form, most commonly from another. But we receive in some way from the environment. Received knowledge, transmitted information. As against that, there is another sort of knowledge that they called gnosis. And philologically, the word gnosis is linked with the Hindu Gyan, sometimes translated as the yoga of knowledge. But that essentially does not mean information. It means insight. Insight that comes from where? Insight that happens? How? Gnosis does not occur when the mind is dominated by the thought process. The thought process may think it knows. The thought process may say it knows. The thought process may have very good reason for asserting, yes, this is so. and will provide reasons, ad infinitum sometimes. But gnosis happens only when thought is in abeyance. When consciousness has space. When there is not the compulsive flow of thought, emotion. When there is a state of poise between the agitations of the material world, of which we are part, physiologically and in other senses, and between the light from which all things proceed, ultimately. So when we know, or we think we know, we don't know. We may be well informed, but that can lead us very far astray. As is very clear by the state of human affairs, by the floundering condition of society, by the inability of our guides, leaders, mentors, to be able to affirm wisdom lies here. They can only pretend. And they do pretend. They pretend to themselves that they know or think they know because they ought to know. That is the expectation we thrust upon them. It's a releasing thing to say, I do not know. Then the possibility arises that knowing may happen. A mind that can say, I do not know, is a mind which at one end of the spectrum is ready to begin to learn, and at the other end of the spectrum already knows, so long as it does not become cluttered with irrelevance. So where do we go from there? What have we come here for? Have we come here to learn something? To know something? Or have we come here not to know? That's a peculiar situation, isn't it? Obviously, the whole thing is beset with paradox. If it were merely a matter of rationality, humanity would have solved all its dilemmas long ago. Rationality is essential. Following perception, following the state of knowing. And then that which is rationalized is the fruit of understanding, the consequence of vision. and not merely the conclusion of a logical process. In all this, we need to pause and realize that we are, all of us, an expression of life. Life seeking fulfillment. Life ever becoming fulfillment. We ourselves are part of that process of fulfillment. If we allow it to happen, fulfillment is. It's not up there or down there, or at some place on the earth's surface. It simply is. Allowing it to happen is really what is meant by faith. And through the flow of faith, which is the flow of life, there will come such beauty as we need to know, such healing as we need to find, such truth as we are equipped to encounter. Truth will come in many ways. It will always come as shock. Sometimes glorious shock, wonderful shock, illuminating shock. Sometimes as troublesome shock, painful shock, deeply disturbing shock. Here is the paradox. Ultimately, whatever happens, whatever shocks us, in whatever way, is the working out of our good. We weren't born merely to be soothed. Quite the contrary. The tension between light and substance and the transmutation of the one into the other as a perpetuum involves not only change, drastic change, but even mutation. We are here to mutate. From a grub into a butterfly. And the means of the accomplishment are so very simple. Merely being what we are. knowing what we know. Breathing, stretching, being silent, laughing, hearing yet again the good old jokes. It's all one. Isn't it? So, don't be disconcerted about not knowing. Rejoice that you're not one of those who know. The possibility then arises that something will happen that is knowledge, not information, not someone's properly approved and transmitted doctrine, which is as dead as soon as it arrives. Because unless doctrine is imparted from the lips of the Illuminati, it has no life. It's like a barrel organ. Go to church and hear the barrel organ. I might not agree with his theology, but I could rejoice in that African bishop who is conscious of the vitality of the apostolic succession. And if there is faith, it is so. If there is not, what did one of the African bishops say? First you came to us and gave us the Bible. Now you tell us it isn't true. Now we're telling you it is. Isn't it strange? And what is right? Who is right? Take the New Testament. Is it true? If you're a historian, obviously it's not true. Can't be true. If you're a physicist, obviously it's not true. Can't be true. Can it? So what is true? Is the story true? If truth equals history, or truth equals physics, then obviously it's not true. But if you say it's not true, you're in a greater state of untruth than if you say it is true. Because it is true. In a much deeper way, in a much deeper sense. And the tunnel vision of any specialist in any discipline. Personally, I have no great problem about the literal resurrection. Bishop Robinson had. We had a few discussions. I pointed out that it's very well attested in the literature of yoga, scientifically verified, that there are people who have such control of the hypothalamus by some process involving breath suspension that when cut, when wounded, the blood flow will cease and healing will be very, very rapid. Walking on water. From very early times and in modern times and scientifically attested. The laws of physics apparently are defied by telekinesis, which I used to see as a child from time to time. And even the motion, the movement of human beings into the air. The records of the Psychical Research Society have a few things to say about that. So if it happens with relatively trivial individuals, why should it not happen with an avatar? Goodness me. And if there is faith, all things are possible. It would seem because then, in the mind that knows shunyata, there is no barrier between the direct manifestation of the primal light and the context within which our intelligence is obliged to operate. So, friends, let it happen. See what happens. Don't be daunted. You may even find you have to draw your Zen sword. If you do, it's only so that others will fall upon it. You do not use it. There's a mystery there. Mysteries involving the powers of life and death, which are all around us, in every atom, everything, birthing and dying. We ourselves, birthing and dying perpetually. So, in the major sense, know the paradox. If we are not, then we are. If we are, or think we are, then we are not, and must discover otherwise. The teaching the world has not yet heard, it seems to me, is the meaning of the ego. Every tradition regrets the ego. Every tradition says away with the ego. In the East, they go so far as to say, annihilate the ego. That's a very good thing. Annihilation is a very liberating word. Does it mean death? Obviously not. It means life. Now, isn't that very strange? In the yoga sense, annihilation means life. If the ego is such a reprehensible occurrence, why does it happen? What is nature's intention? All things in nature have a function, have a purpose. What is the function? What is the purpose of the ego? Where does it come from? It happens because it is born. What occasions its birth? It's the encounter of light and substance at a certain conjunction. There happens the ego, the individuality. In that primal sense, it is the logos. Born of the tension between the incarnating light and the gravitational pull of the earth. What is the function? The light beams forth the ego into the extremities of substance, so that that seed of the light is buried, lost, submerged, overwhelmed in the tremendous dynamics of the earth, ever living, ever dying, perpetually. then the source recalls the ego back to itself. Return unto me. And it returns, annihilated. But something else, which is what is meant in Zen by the return to the marketplace. Which is alluded to by Ramakrishna. When he speaks of the burned rope, no longer binding, but still having a function. So what is the function? The function, may I suggest, there is the light, there is substance that we call the earth. The ego is projected into the earth, completes a cycle, returns to the light. In the process, the injection of the light into the earth and the return dynamic uplifts the earth towards the light, and equally becomes the vessel by which the light concurrently incarnates into the earth in the great cycle of becoming and returning. So to be a human being, in the real sense, is to be one in whom life is manifest alchemically. And the vessel of the transmutation is here. And that function of a human being, the purpose of humanity on earth, is to bring about the spiritualization of the planet by being truly human. Then the instinctual level of intelligence is transformed. Its energy released, its power exalted. And life is fulfilled in the human organism. We often refer to the anti-factor. The anti-factor essentially though we may not experience it as such always, is only inverted good. It exists primarily in experience as gravitation. The anti-factor is that which binds us, holds all things in their courses. But linked with that anti-factor, there is the toxic accumulation of the collective human psyche that we may call the shadow, which has its own intelligence. The anti-factor linking with the shadow will seek to cause human evolution to be earthbound, locked into the gravitational pull of the earth, locked into the instinctual level of activity. Made demonic by association with intellect and all the stratagems of science and all the increasing tampering with the energies of generation, genetic engineering, the libido, it's a pity we have to commit unbounded follies before we can see our way to wisdom. As William Blake said, if the fool persists in his folly, he will eventually become wise. Which is another way of saying all things are for our good ultimately. But take this Viagra nonsense. Just think of that. As though the human race is not in enough trouble with its libido. Human consciousness is going to be trapped into chemically induced dependence on that, and they're inventing one for the female as well. So that the bacchanalian level of intelligence, such as it is, can become a major obstruction to human growth. It's madness, absolute madness. And totally contrary to the wisdom element in every great teaching. So, as the darkness deepens, which it will do, simple things can become the true guide. And I'm reminded of Gandhi's favourite Christian hymn. The words of Cardinal Newman. Lead, kindly light, amidst the encircling gloom, lead thou me on. if we have this sense, of allowing the light to lead, then there is no fear. And if there is no fear, truth will happen. We will be the true. So, is it tea time?